Imagine standing in the heart of the greatest empire the world has ever known. Gold glitters from every rooftop. Massive blue-tiled gates reach toward the heavens. The air is thick with the scent of exotic spices and the sound of 1,000 different languages. This is Babylon, the city of wonders, the city of excess, and for a group of young refugees, the city of their captivity. But what happens when your world is stripped away? When your home is burned to the ground, your name is changed, and you are forced to serve the very king who destroyed everything you loved. Do you blend in to survive? Or do you stand out to stay true? Today, we are diving into one of the most explosive, mysterious, and high-stakes books ever written, the Book of Daniel. This isn't just a Sunday school story about a man in a lion's den. It is a political thriller, a survival guide for the soul, and a cosmic roadmap of the future of humanity. We're going to follow 4 teenagers who dared to defy an emperor, a prophet who saw the rise and fall of nations in his dreams, and a God who proves that even when we feel forgotten in a foreign land, he is the one truly sitting on the throne. Stay with me, because as we peel back the layers of this ancient text, you'll realize that the world Daniel lived in looks a lot more like our world today than you might think. From the fiery furnaces of trial to the terrifying handwriting on the wall, this is the epic journey of Daniel. Let's begin. The year is 605 BC. The dust of the Judean desert kicks up behind a long, somber line of captives. Among them is a young man named Daniel. He is likely no older than 15 or 16. Behind him, the smoke of his burning capital, Jerusalem, still stains the horizon. Ahead of him lies a 1,000-mile trek to a city he has only heard of in whispers of terror, Babylon. This is where our story truly begins, not in a place of peace, but in the crushing weight of displacement. King Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man on earth, didn't just want to conquer nations. He wanted to harvest their best minds. He gave orders to his chief official to bring in the crème de la crème of the captives' young men, without physical flaw, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning. Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, are selected. But there was a dark side to this scholarship. It was a systematic attempt to brainwash them. The empire wanted to strip them of their Hebrew identity and mold them into perfect Babylonian bureaucrats. The first thing they took, their names. Daniel, which means God is my judge, was renamed Belteshazzar, Bel's prince. Their names, which pointed to the one true God, were replaced with names that honored the pagan gods of Babylon. Imagine the psychological toll. You are a refugee, a teenager, thousands of miles from home. Your parents are likely gone. Your temple is destroyed. Now, the government is telling you, forget who you were. You are ours now. Then came the ultimate test of assimilation, the food. The king ordered that these young men be fed from his own table. In the ancient world, this was the highest honor. It was the fine dining of the 6th century BC, rich meats, expensive wines, the best the world could offer. But for Daniel, this was a line he could not cross. This food had likely been sacrificed to idols, and eating it meant violating the sacred covenant of his people. This is the moment where most people would have folded. You're a prisoner. Why risk your life over a menu? But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. Notice that phrase, purposed in his heart. It wasn't a snap decision, it was a pre-established conviction. Daniel doesn't stage a loud protest or start a riot. Instead, he uses the wisdom that would later make him famous. He approaches the overseer with a deal, a 10-day challenge. Give us only vegetables and water, Daniel says. Then compare us to the others. The overseer is terrified. If these boys end up looking sickly, the king will have his head. But he agrees. For 10 days, while the other captives are feasting on the king's steak and wine, Daniel and his friends are eating lentils and water. It's the original Daniel fast. When the 10 days are up, the result is staggering. These 4 young men don't just look okay, they look better, healthier, and more vibrant than anyone else in the palace. But it wasn't just about their skin or their weight. The text tells us that God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel was given the unique ability to understand visions and dreams. At the end of their 3-year training, King Nebuchadnezzar interviews them personally. He isn't looking for religious piety, he's looking for intellectual power. And he finds that Daniel and his friends are 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. This first chapter sets the stage for everything that follows. It tells us that Daniel didn't survive Babylon by blending in. He survived and thrived by standing out. He proved that you can live in a culture without letting that culture live in you. He was in the world of Babylon, but his heart was anchored in something much older and much deeper. As we move forward, we see that this small act of faithfulness with a plate of food prepared Daniel for the monumental tasks ahead, because soon the king would have a dream that would shake the foundations of the world, and only the vegetable-eating captive would have the answer. Imagine the most powerful man in the world waking up in a cold sweat. It's the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. He sits on a throne of gold, commanding armies that have crushed every nation in their path. Yet, in the silence of the night, something has terrified him. He's had a dream so vivid, so haunting, that it leaves his spirit troubled and his sleep gone. But here's the twist that makes this one of the most intense political dramas in history. Nebuchadnezzar calls his magicians, enchanters, and sorcerers. But he doesn't just ask for an interpretation. He sets an impossible trap. He tells them, "I have forgotten the dream. If you are as powerful as you claim, tell me what I saw and what it means. If you can't, I will have you torn limb from limb and your houses turned into piles of rubble." The wise men of Babylon are stunned. They plead with him, "No king has ever asked such a thing. Only the gods can reveal this, and they don't live among men." Their response is the ultimate admission of human limitation, and it sends the king into a blind rage. He orders the execution of every wise man in Babylon. Now, remember Daniel. He's a junior official at this point. He wasn't in the room when the king made his demand, but suddenly the captain of the guard, Arioch, shows up at his door to take him to his execution. This is the moment where Daniel's character truly shines. He doesn't panic. He doesn't beg. With wisdom and tact, he asks for the reason behind the decree. When he hears it, he does something incredibly bold. He asks the king for a little time. Then he goes home and holds a prayer meeting. He tells his 3 friends, "Pray, ask the God of heaven for mercy concerning this mystery, so that we don't all die." That night, in a vision, the mystery is revealed to Daniel. His first reaction isn't to run to the king and save his neck, it's to worship. He breaks into a poem of praise that defines the entire book. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. The next morning, Daniel stands before the most dangerous man on earth. He doesn't take the credit for himself. He tells the king, "No wise man can do what you ask, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." Then he begins to describe the king's dream. "You looked, Your Majesty, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay." Can you imagine the king's face? His eyes must have widened as Daniel described every detail he had seen in his sleep. But Daniel wasn't finished. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Daniel explains the meaning, and it's a terrifyingly accurate map of world history. Nebuchadnezzar and his Babylonian empire are the head of gold, but after him will come a chest of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire, then a belly of bronze, the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great, and finally legs of iron, the Roman Empire, strong, crushing, but eventually becoming divided and brittle like iron mixed with clay. The message was clear: human empires, no matter how golden or strong, are temporary. They are all built on feet of clay. They will all eventually crumble. But the stone, the kingdom of God, will shatter the systems of man and grow into a mountain that lasts forever. King Nebuchadnezzar is so overwhelmed that he falls prostrate before Daniel. The conqueror of the world bows to a teenage captive. He promotes Daniel to ruler over the entire province and places his friends in high positions. For the American listener, this chapter is a profound reminder of the transience of power. We live in a world of superpowers and shifting geopolitics, but Daniel too reminds us that there is a higher narrative. There is a stone that outlasts every statue. But as we'll see in the next part of our story, the king's ego is a stubborn thing. He may have bowed to Daniel's God today, but tomorrow he's going to build a statue of his own, and this time he'll demand that everyone worship it or face the fire. Power is a heavy wine, and King Nebuchadnezzar was drunk on it. Despite his earlier moment of humility before Daniel's God, the king's ego soon demanded a physical monument to his own glory. He erected a colossal statue of gold on the plain of Dura, 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, gleaming under the Babylonian sun. He issued a simple, brutal decree. When the orchestra plays, everyone from every nation, language, and rank must fall down and worship this image. Anyone who doesn't, they go straight into a furnace of blazing fire. Now, picture the scene. Thousands of people, a sea of humanity, hitting the dust the moment the music starts. It's the ultimate display of peer pressure. But in that vast ocean of bowing backs, 3 figures remain standing like pillars of stone: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When the king hears of their defiance, he is livid. He gives them one last chance, mocking them with the question, "And what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Their response is one of the most powerful declarations of faith in human history. They don't beg for their lives. They don't try to negotiate. They simply say, "Our God is able to deliver us. But even if he does not, we will not serve your gods or worship the image you have set up." That phrase, "but even if he does not," is the heartbeat of true courage. It's the refusal to let circumstances dictate your convictions. The king, now insane with rage, orders the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. It's so hot that the soldiers who throw the 3 men into the flames are killed by the sheer radiant heat. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fall, bound, into the heart of the inferno. But as Nebuchadnezzar watches, his face pales. He leaps to his feet and asks his advisors, "Didn't we throw 3 men into the fire? Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." The king calls them out. They walk out of the fire, and the Bible records a stunning detail. They didn't even smell like smoke. Not a hair on their heads was singed. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a total preservation. Once again, the king of Babylon is forced to acknowledge that no other god can save in this way. But the story of courage doesn't end in the fire. We have to fast forward decades. The Babylonian Empire has fallen, replaced by the Medo-Persian Empire. Daniel is no longer a teenager. He is an old man, likely in his 80s, having served multiple kings with flawless integrity. The new ruler, King Darius, loves Daniel and intends to make him the head of the entire government. But the swamp of ancient politics is just as murky as it is today. The other officials are jealous. They try to find dirt on Daniel, some scandal or financial impropriety, but they find nothing. He is beyond reproach. So they decide to weaponize his faith against him. They trick King Darius into signing a law that for 30 days no one can pray to any god or man except the king himself. The penalty? The lion's den. Daniel hears about the law. He knows exactly what it means, but he doesn't hide. He doesn't close his windows. He goes to his upstairs room, opens his windows toward Jerusalem, and prays 3 times a day, just as he had always done. Consistency was his greatest weapon. The trap is sprung. A heartbroken King Darius is forced to throw his most trusted friend into a pit of hungry lions. The king spends the night fasting, unable to sleep. At the first light of dawn, he rushes to the den and calls out in a pained voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God been able to rescue you?" From the darkness of the pit, a calm voice answers, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions." Daniel is pulled out without a scratch. For the second time in this book, a pagan king issues a decree that everyone in the empire must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For an American audience, these stories resonate because they represent the ultimate underdog narrative. But more than that, they challenge us. Would we stay standing when the music plays? Would we keep praying when the lions are roaring? Daniel and his friends show us that when you fear God, you don't have to fear anything else, not the fire, not the lions, and certainly not the whims of an emperor. Success is a dangerous thing. It can blind a person to their own mortality and make them feel like a god. King Nebuchadnezzar had seen the power of the true God multiple times in the interpretation of his dream and in the miracle of the fiery furnace. But his heart was still a fortress of pride. In chapter 4, we see a different side of the king. He is no longer the fiery conqueror, but a man at ease in his palace, prosperous and content. But then another dream comes. This time, it's not a statue made of metal, but a tree so massive its top reached the heavens, visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, providing food and shelter for every living thing. But in the dream, a holy one comes down from heaven and shouts, "Cut down the tree, strip off its leaves, scatter its fruit, but let the stump and its roots remain in the ground." When Daniel is called to interpret, he is visibly shaken. He sits in silence for an hour because the meaning is so heavy. He finally tells the king, "The tree is you, your majesty. You have become great and strong, but because of your pride, you will be driven away from people. You will live with the wild animals and eat grass like an ox for 7 cycles of time, until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms." Daniel, showing his compassion, pleads with the king, "Renounce your sins by doing what is right. Be kind to the oppressed. Perhaps then your prosperity will continue." For 12 months, nothing happens. Perhaps Nebuchadnezzar thought the dream was just a bad memory. But one day, as he is walking on the roof of his royal palace in Babylon, looking out over the hanging gardens and the massive walls, he can't help himself. He says, "Is this not the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" The words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. The judgment was instantaneous. The king of the world lost his mind. He was driven into the fields. His hair grew like the feathers of an eagle, and his nails like the claws of a bird. The most powerful man on earth was now a beast in the field. But there is grace in this story. At the end of the appointed time, Nebuchadnezzar raised his eyes toward heaven. His sanity returned. He didn't just regain his throne, he gained a new heart. He issued a proclamation not about his own glory, but about the God whose dominion is an eternal dominion. It is one of the most remarkable conversion stories in all of history. However, pride is a recurring disease. Years pass. Nebuchadnezzar is gone, and his descendant, Belshazzar, is now on the throne. If Nebuchadnezzar's sin was pride, Belshazzar's sin was sacrilege. Chapter 5 opens with a scene of absolute decadence. Belshazzar is throwing a massive banquet for 1,000 of his lords. The wine is flowing, the music is loud. In a fit of drunken arrogance, Belshazzar orders the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem to be brought out. He wants to use the sacred cups of God's house to toast his idols of gold, silver, bronze, and stone. It was a direct middle finger to the heavens. And heaven answered. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and began writing on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand. The king watched the hand as it wrote. The Bible says his face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his knees knocked together and his legs gave way. The wise men of Babylon were stumped again. But the Queen Mother remembers an old man named Daniel, who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. Daniel is brought in. He's an old man now, likely in his 80s. He doesn't want the king's gifts or honors. He looks the young, arrogant king in the eye and gives him a history lesson. He reminds him of what happened to his ancestor Nebuchadnezzar, how he was humbled until he acknowledged God. But you, Belshazzar, Daniel says, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You held the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways, but you did not honor him. Then Daniel reads the 4 words on the wall. Mean tekel, parsin. The meaning was chilling. Mean, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Peers, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. There was no time for repentance. That very night, while the party was still winding down, the Persian army, which had diverted the waters of the Euphrates River to sneak under the city walls, swarmed the palace. Belshazzar was killed, and the Babylonian Empire, the head of gold, fell in a single night. This section of Daniel is a haunting reminder that while God is patient, he is not indifferent to the abuse of power. For an American listener, it asks the haunting question, are we listening to the lessons of the past, or are we like Belshazzar, drinking from stolen cups while the writing is already on the wall? As we move into the final chapters of Daniel, the book shifts from the palace halls of history into the swirling mists of prophecy and the supernatural. If the first half of the book was about how to live for God in a foreign land, the second half is about why it matters. Daniel, now an old man, begins to have dreams of his own visions that are even more terrifying than the ones he interpreted for Nebuchadnezzar. In one vision, he sees 4 great beasts rising out of a stormy sea. First, a lion with eagle's wings. Then, a bear with 3 ribs in its teeth. Next, a 4-headed leopard with wings. And finally, a beast so terrifying and powerful, it has no name, a creature with iron teeth and 10 horns that crushes everything in its path. These beasts represent the same empires we saw in the statue of chapter 2, but from a different perspective. While the statue saw them as glorious metals, gold, silver, bronze, the vision of the beasts shows what they really are: predatory, violent, and hungry for power. It's a raw look at the nature of human government when it's disconnected from the divine. But right in the middle of this chaos, the scene shifts to the courts of heaven. Daniel sees the Ancient of Days taking his seat on a throne of fire. And then he sees someone incredible, one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approaches the Ancient of Days and is given authority, glory, and sovereign power. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom that will never be destroyed. This is the climax of the entire book. It's the promise that no matter how much beasts, corrupt systems, or cruel leaders might roar or crush the world, their time is limited. The Son of Man is coming to set things right. In the final chapters, Daniel is visited by the angel Gabriel and other heavenly beings who reveal the gritty details of future wars, the rise of a contemptible ruler who will persecute the faithful, and the ultimate triumph of God's people. Daniel is told that there will be a time of great distress, but also a time of resurrection where those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens. The book ends with a deeply personal moment. Daniel is exhausted by these heavy revelations. He wants to understand more, but he is told, "Go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. As for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then, at the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance." It is a quiet, hopeful ending for a man who spent his life in the eye of the storm. Looking back at this epic narrative, the book of Daniel isn't just an ancient record. It's a mirror for our own lives. As I reflect on these stories, one word keeps coming to mind: integrity. In our modern world, we often feel like we are living in Babylon. We are surrounded by a culture that constantly tries to rename us, to tell us what to value, and to pressure us into bowing down to the statues of our age, whether that's money, fame, or political ideology. Daniel's life teaches us that you don't have to be a revolutionary to change the world. You just have to be consistent. Daniel didn't overthrow the Babylonian government. He served it so well and with such honesty that even his enemies couldn't find a single fault in him. He survived the fire and the lions, not because he was a superhero, but because he knew exactly who he was and whose he was. The handwriting on the wall serves as a timeless warning to any society that forgets its moral compass. But the vision of the Son of Man serves as an eternal anchor of hope. It tells us that history isn't just a series of random accidents or the rise and fall of tyrants. It's a story moving toward a beautiful, just conclusion. If there's one takeaway from this journey, it's this. You can be a person of influence without losing your soul. You can live in the palace without forgetting the temple. Thank you so much for journeying through the book of Daniel with me today. It's been an incredible deep dive into history, faith, and the future. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, and if it gave you a bit more courage for your own journey, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder that they aren't alone in the lion's den. I would love to hear your thoughts. Which part of Daniel's story resonates with you the most? Is it the courage in the fire, the mystery of the writing on the wall, or the hope of the final visions? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. We have many more epic stories from the Bible coming your way. Tales of warriors, prophets, and the timeless truths that still shape our world today. Until next time, stay courageous, stay faithful, and keep looking for the stone that outlasts the statue. See you in the next story.